Born Marie Delphine Macarty in March 1787, Delphine grew up in a privileged environment. Her parents, Louis Barthélemy Macarty and Marie Jeanne Label, were prominent European Creoles in New Orleans society. Her uncle was the governor of 2 Spanish-American provinces when she was born, and a cousin later became mayor of New Orleans. During Delphine's childhood, New Orleans and much of Louisiana were under Spanish control from 1763 to 1801. In 1800s, she married her first husband, Don Ram de López y Angulo, a high-ranking officer in Spain's Royal Army. They traveled to Spain and its territories, but Don Ram fell ill and died in Havana a few years later, leaving Delphine a young widow with a baby. In 1808, she married again, this time to a banker named Jean Blanc. Delphine had 4 children with Blanc, but he also died young, making her a widow again in 1816. Delphine married for the 3rd and final time in 1825 to Dr. Leonard Louis Nicolas LaLaurie, who was significantly younger. They moved to a large mansion at Royal Street in New Orleans' French Quarter, which later became the site of her notorious crimes. There are numerous and varied accounts of Delphine Lalaurie's treatment of her enslaved people. It is certain that she and her husband owned several enslaved individuals. While some contemporaries claimed she was publicly civil to her servants, rumors suggested she harbored a dark secret. In the early 1830s, allegations began circulating in the French Quarter that Delphine and possibly her husband were mistreating their enslaved people. Although it was common and legal for enslavers to discipline the people they owned, guidelines were in place to prevent excessive cruelty. On at least 2 occasions, court representatives visited the LaLaurie home to remind them of these standards. British social theorist Harriet Martineau, a contemporary of Delphine, wrote in 1836 about Delphine's suspected hypocrisy. She recounted a story where a neighbor saw a child flying across the yard towards the house, and Madame LaLaurie pursuing her, cowhide in hand, until they ended up on the roof. Martineau described how the neighbor heard the fall and saw the child taken up, her body bending and limbs hanging as if every bone were broken. At night she saw the body brought out, a shallow hole dug by torchlight, and the body covered over. Following this incident, an investigation led to charges of unusual cruelty against Delphine. 9 enslaved people were removed from her home. However, Delphine managed to use her family's connections to reclaim them. There were also allegations that Delphine beat her 2 daughters, particularly when they showed kindness toward the enslaved people. In 1834, a fire broke out at the LaLaurie Mansion, starting in the kitchen. When authorities arrived, they discovered a 70-year-old servant woman chained to the stove. The cook revealed that she had set the fire to commit suicide because Delphine kept her chained and punished her for minor infractions. As firefighters extinguished the blaze and evacuated the house, bystanders forced their way into the quarters for enslaved people and found 7 more individuals chained to walls, horribly mutilated and tortured. They reported to investigators that they had been confined there for months. The next day, the New Orleans Bee reported. Upon entering one of the apartments, the most appalling spectacle met their eyes. 7 slaves, more or less horribly mutilated, were seen suspended by the neck, with their limbs apparently stretched and torn from one extremity to the other. These slaves were the property of the demon in the shape of a woman. They had been confined by her for several months in the situation from which they had thus providentially been rescued, and had been merely kept in existence to prolong their suffering and to make them taste all that the most refined cruelty could inflict. Harriet Martineau's 1838 account indicated that the enslaved people had been flayed and forced to wear spiked iron collars to prevent movement of the head. When questioned, Delphine's husband dismissed the investigators, telling them to mind their own business. Delphine herself escaped, but an enraged mob stormed and destroyed the mansion after news of the abused enslaved people became public. Following the fire, 2 of the rescued enslaved people died from their injuries. Additionally, the backyard was excavated, revealing buried bodies, including that of the child who had fallen from the roof. Reports vary on how many others were buried there. Little is known about Delphine's life after the fire. It is believed she fled to France and died in Paris in 1849, according to archival records. However, a tombstone in New Orleans' St. Louis Cemetery reads, Madame LaLaurie, née Marie Delphine Macarty, décédée à Paris le 7 December 1842, suggesting she died 7 years earlier than the French records indicate. Today, the LaLaurie house is one of New Orleans' most famous attractions. Over the decades, it has been used as a home for wayward boys, a school, an apartment building, and even a furniture store. In 2007, actor Nicolas Cage purchased the house, though he never lived in it. He lost the property to foreclosure 2 years later. While many visitors to New Orleans view the house from the outside, it is now a private residence and not open to tourists. I'd like to take this time to pay my respects to the victims and all the families that were affected by these heinous acts on both sides. You deserve better and are forever in our prayers. May you rest in peace. Conclusion. Slavery is fundamentally wrong for numerous moral, ethical, and legal reasons. At its core, it violates basic human rights. Every person inherently deserves freedom and autonomy, yet slavery denies individuals these essential rights by treating them as property. This system strips people of their liberty, dignity, and the ability to make personal choices, reducing them to mere commodities. The denial of personal autonomy under slavery forces individuals to live under the control of others, often subjecting them to inhumane treatment, forced labor, and harsh living conditions. This obliterates their ability to live their lives according to their own will, leaving them at the mercy of their enslavers. Slavery is frequently associated with severe physical and psychological abuse. Enslaved individuals often endure beatings, starvation, and torture, leading to profound trauma and long-lasting mental health issues. This relentless cruelty fosters a deep sense of worthlessness and despair, further dehumanizing the enslaved. Philosophically, slavery interferes with the natural rights to life, liberty, and property, as articulated by thinkers like John Locke. By treating people as possessions that can be bought, sold, and exploited, slavery inherently violates these fundamental rights. This dehumanization justifies cruelty and exploitation, ignoring the intrinsic value and humanity of each person. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more killer cliff notes, and I'll see you in the next one.